Welcome back to another day of the heat wave. I just figured that out. Looking at my phone this morning, wondering why it's so hot. I guess summer's not going anywhere yet. Um, I found this channel among many other videos I want to make videos on, but eh. But this in particular is very interesting because it's a channel of people that give their own stories of I guess life and what happens and how they just, people just get sick of taking shit after a while. And it's just so funny. So I was like, yeah, I'm sure one of my haters is watching, so
My entitled manager treats me and the rest of the store like absolute garbage, mocking us and belittling us any chance he gets, as well as being super strict about everything at the store. So me and my coworkers decide to get revenge, setting him up for failure right as corporate is coming to visit our restaurant. And I've never been happier to see somebody get taken down in my life. Here's what happened. Entirely too many years ago, I started to work in a fast food company. Let's call it Southern State Not Baked Poultry. Now, this place wasn't a bad first job. I was only 16 at the time, and the assistant manager at that location was my best friend's stepdad. So we took what was tedious and menial and tried to make it fun. He was actually a really good manager and genuinely cared about the people who worked for him. We would do silly stuff before the store opened while we were doing prep. He would have been playing music loudly from his office, and that's as long as everything got done and it was done well. He really didn't care if we had fun doing it. We'll call him Larry. And also, for the sake of this story, every name is fake. But this story is not about Larry. This story is about the store manager itself. We'll call him Tim. Tim was the exact opposite of our assistant manager. Everything had to be taken seriously. Fun was completely outlawed. I genuinely hated working with Tim. Tim was an egocentric, power-hungry, petty little man with delusions of grandeur because he was a store manager for Southern State Not Baked Poultry. Tim's a
now when I was younger and I was studying like generals and stuff, and these things the ninjas and all of this stuff that I bring up, right? All these people from around the world agree, like to gain respect of the people that work for you, to expect them to do the job, but understand that not to be so strict, not to be so like if a worker's getting his job done, but it's like a blazing day or a cold day.
I'm on my way to work.
approach to managing the restaurant was to work the employees until they burned out, and when they did, he would fire them and hire someone else. Needless to say, morale when Tim worked was in the garbage. Tim hated that Cruz would prefer working with Larry instead of him. He hated that Cruz had fun when Larry was working. He hated that our store's numbers were always better when Larry worked. Mostly, he just hated everyone. But one thing that he absolutely hated was a silly little thing that Larry did. If it was before the restaurant opened, he would stick his tongue between his teeth and lower lip and shout out an employee's name right as they walk into the store. It sounded absolutely ridiculous. I would always do the same thing back, which ended up sounding like some weird imitation of what Larry was doing. Now, a perfect example of what an absolute jerk Tim was involved this young woman, and this lady who, due to a variety of stressors, attempted to unalive herself after a particularly grueling shift after working with Tim. After she had recovered, she came back for her last paycheck, and Larry was also working.
Now, I only heard about a minute of this, so that's why that shocked me. I didn't hear that part. Like, do you see what I mean about high school? This is other people that are He's a grown man that doesn't understand, even though he went through high school, that picking on people because you have authority and power can make them want to hurt themselves or hurt you. You know? Like, there's only two ways, yin and yang. I don't understand how this is what makes me fascinated with, I guess, trying to bring the Lord to people that are bad. Because I cannot understand how you can't think of doing the right thing. I understand taking advantage of a situation to gain power, but pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. It's like,
which is not a coincidence. She called the store to find out what day he was working. So Larry sat her down out in the lobby, brought her lunch, brought her last checkout, and sat and talked with her for about an hour. It was after the lunch rush and he had the time, so he made sure that she was doing okay. Talked about whatever she wanted to talk about, and by the time she left, she was smiling, but had tears on her cheeks. She had never had someone just sit and listen, and just let her talk out everything that was going on. But what Tim did next was absolutely unbelievable, and I seriously can't believe the way he acted. The very next day, Tim had come in and hauled Larry into the office. He says to Larry, "The next time the unalive queen comes in, tell her to do it right next time." So hopefully by now you have a clear picture of exactly how petty and vindictive this little man was. And this is right about when the revenge starts to take place. We were scheduled to have the regional and national bigwigs for Southern State Not Baked Poultry come through our area for an annual inspection. Tim had his eyes set on being one of those bigwigs, at least for the region. I mean, why wouldn't he be? He did everything by the book. That automatically made him a good manager, at least in his eyes. Everything had a checklist and a procedure, and a set of written instructions in the book, and if you couldn't meet the expectations set forth in this book, well, Tim would then yell at you and berate you, because that's how a manager is supposed to manage according to Tim. Well, before the bigwigs got to our store, and we knew what day they would be coming, several of us had agreed that on the day they came through, we would all screw up just enough just to get Tim to blow his cool. Because our regional manager and the national bigwigs all believed that Southern State Not Baked Poultry was a family company and that employees were valuable team members. The day in question arrived, and the bigwigs were there for their big tour. And that's when all the problems started to arise. It started with one of the fryers not having the oil replaced last night. Then the shaker table hadn't been cleaned. Or maybe there was way too much cold slaw made up, and we won't get through it before we have to toss it. You get the picture. After the second time I took a minute too long to get a basket of poultry into the cooker, Tim absolutely lost his mind. He started yelling, cursing, throwing things. He actually physically pushed me away from the breading station. And this is right in the middle of the lunch rush.
it seems like other people understand the Jedi mind trick. It seems like other people are important, just like the people that are above them, because if they don't do their job, you know, why do they have to do things? Why do people have to do things like this? Why? It really confuses me at times, because when you lose the battle that you are doing and you become a regular person again, you know what it's like. When you was in high school, when you was a kid, no matter what side you was on, bullying or being bullied, you know what it's like. But to understand science, and I studied not just like the planets and stuff, I like the mind. And I understand a lot of people have mental disorders. There's things wrong with people that scientists don't know. They admit we don't know everything. Diving into the mind is like literally the newest science there is. Like understanding the mind, they don't know. The shadows.
all while the regional and national bigwigs stood there watching. And we were already several lines of people deep in both cash registers, with a lobby full of people eating and watching. Tim stood there gulping like a fish. His mouth was moving like he was trying to say something, but no sounds were coming out. The room was absolutely quiet, other than the beeping of a fryer that was done. I looked at Tim, and this was the moment we had all been gearing up for. I looked down at where he had pushed me, and a set of handprints and flour were on my chest, and so I then cut loose with him. I yelled at him that I quit, took off my apron, and threw it at him. I told him I was tired of the way he was treating me, as well as his poor management, and how he single-handedly drove morale through the floor every time he walked through the doors. How he was an awful excuse for a manager, and that if he didn't have Larry and a good couple of shift leads, he would have driven the location out of business a long time ago. All the color drained from his face, and then he bolted for his office. The national and regional folks ended up comping everyone's meals that were in the restaurant that day. Interestingly enough, Tim was not fired, but he was demoted, and in exchange, Larry was promoted to manager. About 10 years later, I was working at my current job as an EMT. We had just dropped off a patient at the hospital.
So, I don't know if people have learned from this one, but, you know, we all gotta live life, so we either learn or you learn. One way or another, you're gonna learn.
My corrupt and sketchy job plans on firing most of the office, as well as firing me, after I fixed and repaired all of the IT support system. But after watching them lie, cheat, lay off, and gamble our wages for several months, I decided to get some revenge by changing their passwords and effectively bringing their entire business to a screeching halt. Here's what happened. Years back, I worked as the IT director for a small brokerage firm. These types of places try to run lean, so I was the only IT personnel. I took the job, but I was a bit underqualified, if I'm being completely truthful. The reason they gave it to me, though, was because I was young, and they thought that they could underpay me. And you know what? They were completely right. It was $10,000 more than I ever made in my life. I had an awful job at the time, so I took it for the resume.
You see, even though I've never gotten to be in the working world and rise, right? I've always studied it. And I've heard things like this in real life. Because I'll talk to people. So I gain knowledge. And the one thing I've realized, there's no difference between the street, yin, and yang. The blue collar world or the whatever. There's always some older niggas that are like, no, you can't have. And I understand. It's because they order. You know, like the Most High thing. Like he the oldest. And if he gotta, I get it. But it's like, why is there always a scheme now? See, the ones that do it correctly, they do it correctly, and then the young dudes don't have to do things. Because, you know, he's seen that, oh, I'm getting $10,000 more than I'm all right. But they're underpaying me. I should be getting more because I'm worth more. And he knows it already, but he's going to take it. Because he respects the game. You got to earn your way in. It doesn't matter about your skill. Other people have been putting in work for years. Who the fuck are you just to come in here and just, you know, give us older people time to retire and do what we got to do so we live comfortable. See, that's where the younger people need to respect. Allowing the people above them to have their time and get things right for themselves. I can understand that. That's why I said the order of things. But we're not talking about just that natural order. We're talking about, why is there always people scheming on young? Oh yeah, because when you're young you don't know any better. Or you know better and you know the real world, so you're like, wait up. Even though they're robbing me, I'm getting $10,000 more than I would anyway, so I'm technically getting robbed, but, you know, it's better than where I'm at, so that's fucked up for people that have to think like that. That's not right, but it's reality.
Title step up, and honestly, it did work out as a good resume builder. I struggled and had to do an endless amount of learning on the job, but I made huge improvements. Now, the day-to-day was sketchy there. We only had 5 employees supporting the 4 partners and the 70-plus brokers. Now, the brokers didn't really work there. They rented a desk for a percentage, so they didn't care how many brokers there were on staff. There were a couple of gems, but ultimately we were understaffed because they looked at full-time employees like we were stealing from them. They made us work long hours and work weekends with no overtime. Everyone was underpaid or an overpaid buddy of somebody. Worse was the awful partners. The 4 partners were constantly doing shady stuff. One partner would take money from the broker commissions and go to Vegas with it. If he lost the money, we are talking like maybe $100,000 per trip, he would just let the brokers know there's a hold from the bank and their commissions are coming in slowly. Another broker straight up asked me how to hide his affair from his wife. Another had me come to his house on company time and install some audio and video equipment after hours, all without paying me. When I came on board, they were 10 years out of date on technology. I helped them get up to 100%. I fixed their redundant ISP lines and network equipment. I off-sided the mail to make it more reliable. Dozens of improvements, and everyone was pretty happy. All brokers and employees.
See, that's the point right there. That's when the war starts between the older gentleman and the younger gentleman. Because, you know, my father, he used like to call him Father Time. Because, you know, no man's gonna stay strong forever because time's going to get rid of you. No matter how great you are, you're going in that ground. Because only my father can stay on top forever. Get it? He's the only one that can do anything that anyone wants to do. It's because they're trying to be like him. You don't get the game. I get it. That's where it starts, though. Don't that sound familiar, like Lucifer? I started making things efficient. I'm rising up. But then Lucifer goes, wait up. I should run shit. I should be the one. Get it? Or on the opposite end, this is where mere mortals try to play God and they don't realize, like, you're not God. There's ways to get around you subduing this younger man from his greatness and allowing him to be great, but subduing him from getting you out the way. You pay them. You take them in the back and you say, listen, I know what's going on here, young man. We're not going to let you do it. Now sign this contract that you're going to get this money. We're going to pay you, nigga. But you're not just coming up here flossing. Like, keep flossing, keep making the bread, but we're not giving you manager positions or wherever you're trying to stop this man from. But you cannot not compensate this nigga for him actually making you more money. Getting things in order. Get it? That's not fair. And this story gets worse because, you know, people are stupid and they're greedy.
Love the improvements. Then the partners started doing really sketchy stuff. And at this point, I really realized who it is I was dealing with and how sketchy these people truly can be. These people eventually had me open employee exchange mailboxes and run mail queries on email addresses. And it turns out the emails were from a lawyer email between the lawyer and their client, who was one of the employees. They had me do this all the time for anyone. I would have to collect it all, and then they would fire them and keep their clients. It is illegal in the brokerage firm to look at them, and I didn't know that at the time. They somehow convinced a lending company to merge with them. And this was a totally different crew. They were nice, honest, real customer focused. I made friends with one of the lending agents, and he helped me search for houses on his MLS account on lunch. The nicest guy ever. His wife and her dad ran the firm until the merger. Eventually, after many different events, I found out the plan they had in action was to simply fire everyone from from the firm and just steal the name and the client list. And they had only been there for a few months, so just long enough to learn their business. I also found out they were going to fire me now that everything was more reliable. And do you want to know how I found out? Well, I saw it in an email. During one of the email queries, one of the partners had me due to another partner. So the
See, you see how he said they're gonna let everybody work for a certain amount of months, build up their thing, and then they're gonna get rid of them and steal their clients. I got told by an OG on low level shit a long time ago, if you're trying to get a job seriously, I feel bad for you young motherfuckers. It ain't gonna happen. This ain't 1940, and the shit that they got going now it's legal, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm an OG, and I've been here before they changed everything, so they can't get rid of my ass. So what they do is they allow me to work for a certain amount of time, and then they send me on vacation, and then I get unemployment checks. And then that's when they bring you in here, the new guys. And then you think you're going to stay, and then couple months, I'll be coming back and you'll be going home. And they just keep doing it over and over. So you're getting robbed, I'm getting robbed, but I'm alright because I'm older and, you know, the older dudes protected ourselves with the law. So we're good. So, good luck in the future, young man. And I said, fuck. That's what's been going on this whole time.
Only nice people at this awful place were getting locked out of their office over the weekend, and I was now getting fired, now that I had essentially made myself redundant. Well, in their mind at least. Now, before I go any further, let me tell you about the red folder. The red folder was locked in my file cabinet. It contained every password for administration access to every system. It also contained the fire plan or downtime plan for every system in the company. My boss didn't really understand why we needed one, and he never really looked at it. Well, I called my friend, who worked for the lending firm, and I told him to head to the office and grab all the files and computers, as they did technically belong to them anyways. I told them the plan about changing the locks over the weekend. I told them that I was quitting and not to mention me. He said he understood, and then he thanked me. I changed the only other admin password that my boss had access to, and then I shredded the red folder. After all was said and done, I emailed my resignation. Well, as you can probably guess, they begged me to come back. They offered me a 30% pay bump. They said they were shocked I was so disloyal. Well, fast forward, and I heard years later from a secretary that worked there at the time that it took them 4 months to get all systems under control again. They had to use a contractor they relied on before, and I heard it cost them a year of my salary. And honestly, that's exactly what they get after all the sketchy stuff they had me do, as well as their plan to fire me and the rest of the firm. Wow, that is honestly some awesome.
So I was gonna take you guys out in a bang with a song or some type of instrumental, but I came across this, and it says that it's been released 20 hours ago. This video from this guy, and I don't watch the news or nothing like this. Show
The scientific community is melting down over the discovery of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is a crazy story, and what I love most about this is any of you guys who've ever been interested in going to Israel, when you go, you will discover the amount of archaeological evidence that confirms different people in the Bible, like Pontius Pilate, different streets that were courts, like David's palace, they didn't think existed, and they find it. It is beyond fascinating, all of the amazing archaeological discoveries that just happened within the last 20 years, okay? And so this story is much like that because it perplexes the scientific community. Be like, oh, there's no way that could have happened. That doesn't make any sense. How could that biblical story be true? That's just a fantasy. And sure enough, there is now archaeological evidence that Sodom, from the Bible story, existed. Okay, scientific community meltdown over controversial discovery of biblical Sodom. The city remains in a fury near the Dead Sea. Have archaeologists at odds. Okay, so it's very interesting. So I wanted to show you guys this clip from one of my favorite Catholic creators, believe it or not, and he interviews John Bergsma on this topic. This is Pints with Aquinas, Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah.
That is one of the most sensational stories.
Sum it up for those
recent
who
history.
know where they should be.
Yes. Okay. I mean, so Sodom and Gomorrah, it looks like one of those mythological stories out of the Bible, right? Oh yeah, sure. Fire comes from heaven. Yeah, tell me another one. And I'll be honest with you, Matt. When I was growing up and reading Genesis 19 and stuff like that, it was a challenge to my faith. I'm like, okay, come on, really? This really happened? Are we supposed to understand this? Several years ago now, maybe like 15 years ago, I was at the Society of Biblical Literature, which was being held in that year in San Francisco. I just wandered into this session because it had an intriguing title, something about archaeological discoveries at Tel El Hammam in Jordan. I thought, well, I'll walk into this, I start listening, and as I'm listening to this presentation for about 45 minutes, near the end of it, I began to realize, oh my gosh, these people presenting think that they have found the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah.
That's crazy. Okay, now where do they think Sodom and Gomorrah?
Hey, it's me, your
That's
dry
crazy.
skin.
Earlier, they believe that it's near the Dead Sea Scroll, what everyone agrees on. Something unusual happened at Tal El Haman, an ancient settlement near the Dead Sea. In a layer of ancient earth, archaeologists claim to have found the evidence of an apocalyptic event. Melted rooftops, disintegrated pottery, unusual patterns in the rock formation that could be caused with intense heat. For another 3 to 6 centuries after 1650 BC, the settlement, 100 acres, lay fallow.
So at the end of the presentation, they stop the presentation and they open up for questions, and they describe these 2 city mounds that they had found on the Jordanian side of the Jordan River, and in this destruction layer and so on. And so I raised my hand immediately and I said, well, did you find any arrowheads? The reason I asked that, Matt, is when you have a destruction layer of an ancient city, if you find arrowheads in the destruction layer, it means that an army caused the destruction and they were shooting arrows at the defenders and blah, 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 blah.
Ah, okay. That's interesting.
If you find a destruction layer...
Or it could be a symbol of Jacob was there because Jacob is the master of the bow.
And there aren't arrowheads, that means an army did not destroy the city, and then probably it was some kind of natural event.
Whoops. Can you guys all see where this is going?
I see what he means, though.
Right? So I'm curious, what destroyed these 2 cities that you guys think are Sodom and Gomorrah? And so the researcher starts to get very bashful when I ask this question. He says, well, I don't really want to go there, but all I want to say while we're recording the session is that it was a heat event.
That's funny.
Okay, why this is so fascinating is because people repeatedly attempting to disprove parts of the Bible repeatedly get egg on their face because there are more and more of these stories that are confirmed by archaeology and then also confirmed in other non-biblical accounts and other oral traditions. Now we have Sodom and Gomorrah, and obviously the flood is another one of those, right? So it's very fascinating that this sort of stuff